Mother Simpson. It starts on a sunny Saturday, and Mr. Burns has roped all his employees into cleaning up a highway that his company's supposed to maintain. Naturally, everyone's pretty annoyed about having to volunteer on their weekend off, especially since Mr. Burns only shows up to snap a quick photo of himself pretending to be part of the cleanup crew before jetting off. Talk about not leading by example. Meanwhile, Homer's MIA until suddenly he appears on top of a nearby cliff. As he makes his way down, he slips, tumbles, and gets sucked into a turbine, leaving his coworkers absolutely stunned. But here's the twist. That wasn't actually Homer. He'd cleverly thrown a dummy of himself off the cliff so he could ditch work and enjoy a fun Saturday with his family. By the next day, word of Homer's death has spread like wildfire across Springfield. Marge starts getting a flood of condolences from everyone in town. Patty and Selma show up with a tombstone that reads, "Homer J. Simpson, we are richer for having lost him," something they've apparently been saving since Marge's wedding day. Understandably, Marge is furious and kicks them out, yelling,
"Get out of here, you ghouls!"
When the house's power gets cut off because it's all under Homer's name, Marge finally puts her foot down and tells Homer to straighten out the whole misunderstanding. So, the next day, Homer heads over to the Springfield Hall of Records to sort things out. But then, he stumbles upon something shocking in the records. His mother is listed as still alive. He rushes to what he thinks is her grave, only to find out it's actually Walt Whitman's grave. Right next to it, he finds a grave with his own name on it, thanks to Patty and Selma, and falls into it. His mother, Mona Simpson, appears at the gravesite. At first, she doesn't believe it's really him, but when he explains that it's his grave, they have a tearful reunion after being separated for 27 years. Homer brings Mona home to meet the family, causing quite the stir. Marge is in disbelief that she now has a mother-in-law, while Bart is only focused on all the overdue Christmas presents he thinks he's owed. Homer's a bit ticked off by Bart's reaction, but Mona takes it in stride. She even bonds with Lisa over their shared intellect and socially conscious views. But when a police car drives by, Mona suddenly bolts inside the house, which raises Lisa's suspicions. She and Bart team up and discover several driver's licenses in Mona's purse, each with a different name, but with the same photo. Lisa starts to wonder if Mona might be a con artist. Homer and Marge are also questioning why Mona left him for all those years, thinking maybe he was such a bad son that no mother could love him. Determined to get answers, the whole family confronts Mona, even threatening to call the police. Mona finally decides to spill the truth when they threaten to tell Grandpa that she's back in town. The story then flashes back to 1968, back when Mona was still living with Homer and Grandpa. It's clear she and Grandpa didn't have much in common. After being unexpectedly inspired by Joe Namath's hair during Super Bowl III, she became radicalized and joined a group of hippies protesting a germ warfare lab owned by Monty Burns. They managed to set off an antibiotic bomb in the lab, wiping out all the germs and even curing security guard Clancy Wiggum's asthma. But Mr. Burns, furious over the loss of his precious germs, managed to identify Mona as one of the culprits. Fearing for her family's safety, Mona decided to go into hiding, but not before giving a sleeping Homer one last kiss goodbye. After hearing all this, the family finally understands why Mona left. Homer, still confused, wonders why she never contacted him. Mona insists she did send him packages, so they head to the post office to track them down, only to learn that the undelivered packages were never handed over because Homer didn't tip the letter carrier at Christmas. While at the post office, Mr. Burns somehow spots Mona and immediately calls the FBI, sending agents Bill Gannon and Joe Friday to hunt her down. Grandpa gets the shock of his life when he shows up at the Simpsons' house and sees Mona. After a tense exchange, Abe makes an awkward attempt at rekindling things, but Mona isn't having it. The FBI and Mr. Burns track Mona's location through a cab driver, a gravedigger, and, of course, Patty and Selma. In the end, Homer and Mona manage to escape thanks to Clancy Wiggum, who's eternally grateful to Mona for curing his asthma. But unfortunately, Mona has to go back into hiding. As she leaves, one last moment confirms she's truly Homer's mom. She bumps her head getting into the hippie van and lets out a classic Moving on, we have an early Simpsons episode that featured a brush with death for Homer. One fish, two fish, blowfish, bluefish is yet another dramatic and sad episode. It starts on Meatloaf Night for The Simpsons, and Homer is understandably beside himself with joy. But Lisa happens to point out how predictable their dinners are, and she wants a change. so she suggests they mix things up a bit. The family agrees to try something new on Friday night, even though Homer grumbles a bit about missing his beloved pork chop night. When they ask Lisa for suggestions, she insists on a place that doesn't serve burgers, pizza, or fried chicken. Marge, however, proposes they check out the new sushi bar in town, the Happy Sumo. At the sushi bar, the family scores great seating and things are going well. After trying a bunch of different sushi dishes, Homer decides to order the fugu, a risky choice since it can be deadly if not prepared correctly. Akira, the server, attempts to give Homer a heads up about the danger, but Homer just brushes him off. In the kitchen, the master chef is occupied with Edna Crabapple, leaving the apprentice to handle the fugu. The apprentice does his best, but Homer's impatient yelling throws him off, and he ends up serving the dish incorrectly. Homer is clueless about any danger and digs in before he declares how delicious it is. Then, when the master chef finally returns and sees the mess, he warns Homer that he might have been poisoned. Panicked, Homer and Marge rush to the hospital, where Dr. Hibbert breaks the bad news. There's a good chance Homer consumed the deadly blowfish poison, and if so, he's got just 24 hours to live. That night, Homer decides not to tell the kids and instead makes a bucket list of all the things he wants to do before he dies. On his last day, after oversleeping, Homer scrambles to check off the items on his list. He has a heart-to-heart with Bart, listens to Lisa play her sax, and even borrows Flanders' camcorder to make a video for Maggie to watch when she's older. In a rush to make up for lost time, Homer gets pulled over for speeding and ends up in jail. He calls Barney, who bails him out, but with time running out, Homer still manages to tell off Mr. Burns and have one last drink at Moe's, even though it means missing dinner with his family. He finally makes it home just in time to say goodbye to the kids and share one last intimate moment with Marge. At midnight, Homer sneaks out of bed, quietly says goodbye to each of his sleeping family members, and then goes to the living room to listen to Larry King read the Bible on tape. As the tape ends, Homer's head slumps forward, and it seems like he's finally succumbed to the poison. The next morning, Marge wakes up in a panic when she realizes Homer's not in bed. She rushes downstairs and finds him slumped in an armchair. Fearing the worst, she's about to break down when she notices his drool is still warm. She shakes him awake, and Homer is overjoyed to realize he's still alive. It turns out that he didn't eat the poisoned fish after all. With a new lease on life, Homer vows to live every day to the fullest. But of course, the episode ends with him back to his old habits, watching a bowling tournament on TV while munching on pork rinds. Next, we have Round Springfield, an episode that sadly gave Lisa Simpson her first taste with death. But the good news is that it has moments that'll make you cry tears of sadness and joy. At the start of the episode, Bart's morning begins as usual, with some TV time featuring Krusty's latest financial fiasco with his workers. But then Marge swoops in, ready to quiz him on his history test prep. As if that wasn't enough, Bart manages to chomp down on a jagged metal Crustio hidden in his cereal, instantly earning himself a nasty stomachache. Marge, thinking Bart is just faking it to dodge the test, doesn't buy it. Lisa, ever the supportive sister, is the only one who believed him, but off to school, Bart goes anyway. At school, Bart is a mess during his history test. After some serious convincing, Mrs. Crabapple finally let him see the nurse. Unfortunately for Bart, Nurse Doris hands him some kitty vitamins, which do nothing for his pain. Bart, in agony, collapses right in front of Superintendent Chalmers and ends up at Springfield General Hospital. There, Dr. Hibbert and the not-so-reliable Dr. Nick Riviera prep him for surgery. Turns out he has appendicitis. After a minor hiccup with the anesthesia, the surgery goes smoothly, and Bart wakes up to see his family. Homer calls it a miracle that Bart is still alive. Bart, still miffed that no one believed him, snaps back with,
"No thanks to you, Homer."
While Bart is recovering, Dr. Hibbert reveals the jagged metal Crustio as the culprit. Lisa, visiting Bart, runs into her hero, Bleeding Gums Murphy, who's in another ward. After chatting, Lisa borrows Murphy's saxophone for her school recital. With most of the band sidelined from their own appendix removals, it is all down to Lisa, Martin Prince, and Ralph Wiggum. Things start off rocky, but Lisa's solo performance steals the show and she blows everyone away. Sadly, when she returns to the hospital to tell Bleeding Gums the good news, she finds out that he's passed away. Heartbroken, Lisa is the only one at his funeral and vows to make sure Springfield would remember Bleeding Gums Murphy. Bart, on the other hand, takes Krusty the Clown to court and wins $100,000. But after his lawyer Lionel Hutz takes his hefty cut, Bart was left with just $500. Still grieving, Lisa decides to honor Murphy by getting his album played on the local jazz station. She finds the album at the Android's dungeon for $250, but after hearing about Murphy's death, Comic Book Guy jacks up the price to $500. Just as Bart walks in ready to splurge on the ultimate Pog featuring Stephen Allen, He sees how down Lisa is and decides to buy the album for her instead. Bart hands over the album to a thrilled Lisa. When she asks why he did it, Bart tells her that she was the only one who believed him when he was in pain. Lisa points out that he'd never see that $500 again, but Bart isn't worried, especially since there was a new Crucio cereal with flesh-eating bacteria in every box. When the station finally plays Murphy's song, Lisa is bummed out that the station's tiny range meant hardly anyone can hear it. But then a lightning bolt hits the antenna, boosting the signal and blasting Murphy's music all over Springfield. Lisa, feeling satisfied, dedicates the moment to Bleeding Gums. As she walked away, Bleeding Gums appears in the sky, thanking Lisa for making an old jazzman happy. Together, they jammed to Jazzman one last time. All these years later, Round Springfield is still considered a touching Simpsons classic, partly because of the death of Bleeding Gums, but also because of the generous and loving actions of Bart for his dear sister. If you want to talk about an episode that brings a tear to the eye of any Simpsons fan, you have to talk about And Maggie Makes Three. Is it sad? Well, kinda. But is it deeply moving and touching? Absolutely. The episode begins with Marge wanting to have a TV-free family hour every week, and while the family initially sits in awkward silence, they soon decide to flip through old photo albums instead. As they do, Bart and Lisa start to notice something weird. There aren't many baby pictures of Maggie. Curious, they ask why, and that's when Homer starts to spin a wild tale about how he single-handedly took down a team of terrorists who had taken over the power plant. But Marge quickly cuts him off, telling him to just give them the real story. Turns out Homer used to hate his job at the Springfield nuclear power plant. His dream was to work at a bowling alley, and after carefully paying off his debts, he finally managed to land his dream job. Sure, it meant less pay, but it was way less stressful, and the family was getting by just fine with the four of them. Homer was sure that as long as nothing changed, everything would be perfect. But of course, something did change. That night, feeling pretty good about life, Homer took Marge out on a romantic date. They hit up Krusty Burger while jamming to disco tunes and then took a walk on the beach, where they ended up kissing in the sand. They wrapped up the evening at home, and, well, that's when Maggie came into the picture, although Homer had no clue at the time. Even though Marge was dealing with morning sickness and other pregnancy signs, Homer remained blissfully unaware and happy with life. Marge knew another baby would mean Homer would have to get a better paying job, so she tried to keep it a secret as long as possible. But when Patty and Selma found out, they couldn't resist gossiping, and soon, the whole town knew before Homer did. Later, Patty and Selma threw Marge a surprise baby shower, conveniently forgetting that Homer would be home soon. On his way back, people kept congratulating him. He thought it was because of his new job. But when he got home and saw the baby shower, it hit him. Marge was pregnant. He had the same panicked reaction he'd had when he found out about Bart and Lisa. Homer wasn't thrilled about the new baby. He knew it meant giving up his dream job at the bowling alley and going back to the plant. He tried to get a raise at the alley, but it didn't work out, so he had no choice but to return to the plant. Mr. Burns, of course, was smug about it, and even put up a plaque at Homer's workstation, as a not-so-subtle reminder that Homer was stuck there for good. Despite all his dread, the moment Maggie was born and she touched his thumb, Homer fell head over heels for her. It happened in an instant, and Homer immediately knew he'd love her forever. Fast forward to the present, Homer tells the kids that he really did love Maggie from the start. Bart, still curious, asks why Maggie's baby pictures aren't in the album. Homer just smiles and says he keeps them where he needs cheering up the most. The scene then shifts to the power plant, where we see Homer's workstation covered in Maggie's baby pictures, cleverly arranged around the plaque. The final frame of this episode is one that gently touched the hearts of all Simpsons fans. It is still considered one of the most heartwarming moments in the history of the show. Our final episode on the list is another one that features heartbreak for Lisa. This time because she has to say goodbye to a teacher who touches her heart and changes her life. The episode starts with Lisa's teacher, Miss Hoover, thinking she's got Lyme disease, so she's swapped out for a substitute, Mr. Bergstrom. This guy isn't your average teacher. He's got this cool, quirky style that grabs Lisa's attention, and before she knows it, she's got a bit of a crush on him. Back home, Marge suggests Homer take Lisa to a museum for some quality time, but Homer's more interested in helping Bart with his campaign for class president, leading Marge to put her foot down and drag Homer to the museum anyway. At the museum, Lisa bumps into Mr. Bergstrom, and things get a little awkward when Homer starts showing off just how little he knows. Mr. Bergstrom, sensing that Lisa might be missing something in her relationship with her dad, pulls Homer aside for a little chat. He tells Homer he needs to step up as a role model, even implying that Homer might be slacking in the dad department. Later, Lisa pours pours her heart out to Marge about how Homer totally botched her chance to bond with Mr. Bergstrom outside of school. Marge, feeling for her daughter, lets her invite Mr. Bergstrom to dinner, but Lisa's hopes are dashed when she finds out Miss Hoover is back and Mr. Bergstrom has vanished. Desperate, she rushes to his apartment, only to learn he's already moved on to another job. She races to the train station, catches him just in time, and tearfully confesses she'll be lost without him. To comfort her, he hands her a note that tells her that if she ever feels alone, the note is all she needs. As the train pulls away, she opens the note to find the words, "You are Lisa Simpson." Crushed by Mr. Bergstrom's departure, Lisa takes her frustration out on Homer, calling him a baboon. Marge nudges Homer to go talk to her, explaining that Lisa's really hurting and needs her dad. Homer, not exactly a pro at dealing with emotions, finds Lisa crying in her room and tries to comfort her. He admits he doesn't really know what it's like to lose someone important, since everyone he loves still lives with him. Then, in true Homer fashion, he brings up Lisa calling him a baboon and starts mimicking a monkey, which actually gets Lisa to crack a smile. Lisa apologizes for calling him a baboon and Homer, of course, forgives her. Done enough crying?